Hello, and welcome back to this, our 26th live stream. Wow, it's been a half year. 6 months. I can hardly believe it myself. I can hardly believe that we've been doing this now for 6 months. When we kind of started doing live streams here, we kind of thought, well, people would have their one or two questions about the Exodus, and then that would be it. But your guys' ability to come up with questions has really astounded us, and we're really happy that you are asking really great questions, because that's what we strive to do. Is we strive to answer your questions on ancient Egypt and the Bible. So with that said, let's get into it. Again, the rules are the same as always. Super chats have priority. If you want to ask a non-super chat question, please be sure to begin the question with a Q and a colon, so I know that it's directed to me and not to somebody else in the live chat. I also ask that you ask the question only once, so that when I do scan through to find questions from non-super chats, that I know which ones I've covered and which ones I don't. And finally, I would ask that if you do have a question about, say, a specific word or a specific Bible passage, either include what you think the word means or give me the Bible passage. In essence, give me a little context, because, the subjects I engage cover such a broad range. It's often hard for me to know where exactly something comes from if I don't have enough context. So give me the Bible passage or what you think the word means, and we'll work it out from there. But I also don't mind telling you too that if I don't know it's something, can't figure it out, that I need more context too. So with that said, let's get into it. Now we're going to start off with 3 non-super chats, because I want to make sure we get some non-super chats in. So the first non-super chat is from Icebread, and he asks, when are you going to write a book on the evidence for the Exodus for the average layman to read? I've become a big fan recently, and I think only you can do this. Well, I'm probably not the only person to be able to do this, but I do appreciate your confidence in me to be able to do this. Basically, here's the rate determining step, is time. It takes a lot of time to write books. And for me, I work a 9-to-5 manual labor job to pay the rent. Okay? So because I work a 9-to-5 job to pay the rent, as opposed to writing books, there's a limitation to how many books I can actually write. So I do my best with the time I've got, but I've got a lot of competing priorities. I mean, frankly, it takes a lot of time just to produce the videos for this channel. A good 2 days a week go just into producing videos for this channel. And I'm not even talking about the live stream here. So basically, when I come home from work on a Friday night, I basically do this live stream. That doesn't leave much time left for writing. So we had hoped to be able to earn enough money through, say, GoFundMe to do a book on the plagues of the Exodus. But unfortunately, it hasn't earned enough for me to actually, take a sabbatical and focus just on writing. So, that's the reason, the main reason why I don't write more books is just a matter of time. I don't have the time to do it. And if I was working at a university, it would be even then, it would be a lot easier, because, you can sort of fit it in with office hours. Because one of the things is, if you've got office hours at a school, chances are students don't come by during office hours. That's basically an hour of free writing a week that you can do. And plus, you've got access to libraries that you can just walk down, say, the block, and go and get books and resources and that sort of thing. And I don't have that same sort of access. So, that's why that book is probably not going to be coming in the near future as much as I would like it to. I have thought about doing that book, and I would really, really like to do a book on that, say after I do the Plagues of the Exodus. But it's sort of a low priority at the moment. But I appreciate the suggestion. You're not the first person who suggested it, but I did want to take that question and at least address why that book is not getting done. Okay? So, anyway, thank you very much for the question, and we'll go on to the next one. Okay. Ever heard of Babylon Rising by Tim LaHaye of Left Behind? It's basically an Indiana Jones for evangelicals. Well, I'm going to be very, very honest here. Chowie, I mean, it's an interesting question, but I don't actually read much Tim LaHaye or even Christian fiction. I do read fiction. I'm very, I love the books of C.M. Forster. You know, I love the book. I recently have both read the book on was The Good Shepherd, and I'm now into the Horatio Hornblower series. So I do read fiction, and I love quality fiction. It's one of the reasons I love science fiction. I love really, really interesting science fiction. I love ideas. I love good use of the English language. Oh, I just love quality fiction. Tim LaHaye, not so much. I've never been able to get into Tim LaHaye or his fiction. I don't think it's that good. I know some people really love it. I'm not putting down their sense of taste. It's just not for me. I don't really care for it. So, but thank you very much for the question. So I haven't read the book. I can't even say I really sort of even of the books I've read of his, I don't really care for that much. So anyway, thank you very much for the question. And our third non-super chat here is by F.H. Sanders. Thoughts on the claim that Amenhotep Kopchef died by being hit by a base, as is argued from a skull which was found. See, a pharaoh's firstborn son is resurrected from NBC News. Okay. Now, the origin of this is from Kent Weeks. Now, I like Kent Weeks. I respect Kent Weeks. Kent Weeks is a great Egyptologist. I do think he's sort of jumping the gun here. Now, the skeletal remains of this, well, we'll say prince. It probably is one of the sons of Ramses II. The problem is these skeletal remains was found in a pit. So it wasn't actually found in the tomb of Amenhotep Kopchef. It was found in a pit with the skeletal remains of three other individuals. So it's 4 individuals whose skeletal remains were all sort of mixed together. So you have to ask the question, how can you tell, say, the skeletal remains of Amenhotep Kopchef versus the skull remains of, say, the other 119 sons or daughters of Ramses II. So, because we just have a skull here, we can't really be sure about the sex of the person that this remains come from. Now, given that it is possibly a mace impact, it could have been one of the other sons. It may have possibly even been a son of Ramses II that died before Amenhotep Kopchef. While Amenhotep Kopchef was the firstborn son, he's not necessarily the first son of Ramses II to have died. So there's a lot of ambiguity here. The other thing that makes me think that this was not Amenhotep Kopchef was the fact that Amenhotep Kopchef had successfully negotiated the peace treaty between the Egyptians and the Hittites. How is he going to be getting mace to the head at that point? You know, one of the things that Kent Weeks speculates was that he was hit in the head by with a heavy object by his spouse. It's getting pretty speculative. Honestly, it's getting really, really, really speculative. So, you know, any one of those 4 skeletons could have been Amenhotep, not necessarily the guy that got beamed in the head. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much for the question. Very interesting question. All right, let's get into the super chats. Oops. Turn them all off first. Okay. The first super chat comes from Brick Creation for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. What is your opinion about the 480 years between the Israelites leaving Egypt and Solomon building his temple mentioned in 1 Kings 6? Okay, let's actually read that, because that always helps. 1 Kings 6, and it's 6:1 specifically. Now, it came about in the 480th year after the sons of Israel came out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv, which is the 2nd month, that he began to build the house of the Lord. Okay. Now, what I think of what's happening here is that this is clearly a temple dedication inscription. And we find these temple dedication inscriptions all over the ancient Near East. And they follow a common pattern. They have a numerologically significant number of years, going back to antiquity, that connected to an event, important event in the past. And it is in the relation to the foundation of a temple. So we've got those criteria right there. The other thing is that of the temple dedication inscriptions that we find, none of them are actually exact to the date. So that's very interesting right there. Now, as far as the 480 goes, what we have is, say, the multiplication of 2 religiously significant numbers. 40 times 12. Now, 12, we don't really need to explain why that's religiously significant. The 12 tribes, 12 disciples. 12 is seen as sort of a number of completeness in ancient Israel. 40 is an idiom. 40 is an idiom that is often used in the Levant and even in Egypt to express a undeterminate long time. Like we find this in the Moabite stela, where King Mesha talks about Omri having lived his perfect 40 years. Well, Omri actually reigned 12 years. So in the Mesha stela, it is being used to express that indeterminate long time. He lived a long time. We also find this, say, even expressed throughout the Bible, where King David is said to have reigned 40 years. But after Absalom's return, 40 years pass before he goes and approaches his father David. Well, you can't have both those 40 years being literal at the same time. You know, one of them has to be an idiom. So in the case of, say, the 480 years, we do find, say, something very, very similar in the temple dedication of Elishama, where you have a 12 by 60. Now, in Mesopotamian culture, 60 fills the same role as 40 in, say, more Levantine writings. So you got that going on in Mesopotamian culture. So you have, say, in the temple dedication of Elishama, 720 years instead of 480. So we do find this, that, you know, I mean, even say, for example, the temple dedication of, say, the temple of Seth at Avaris, that has a 400-year, 4th month, 4th day temple dedication of a King Nebti. Well, if you look at the hieroglyphs, it's clear that the King Nebti is a Hyksos king. The Hyksos didn't come to the throne until 50 years after that sort of retrojected period in time. So we do know that these inscriptions are not accurate, but they are numerologically significant, and they do seem to follow a pattern, and 1 Kings 6:1 definitely follows that pattern of a temple dedication inscription, with all the idiosyncrasies that we find in ancient Near Eastern temple dedication inscriptions. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. I hope that answered your question. And thank you very much. Okay. The second super chat. Any thoughts on cannabis found at the shrine of Tel Arad in Judah? Is this an example of overbaked headlines? Thanks. Well, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Yes, I think it is. Now, there was actually a similar report that came out of Egypt where analysis of, say, mummified remains found tobacco and cocaine. Well, tobacco and cocaine were often used by 19th century archaeologists recreationally. So we do find that in many cases, a lot of these remains, chemical remains of modern recreational pharmaceuticals, tend to be people who just sort of, break into the site and toke up. So I think that's what's happening at Tel Arad. I don't think they're actually finding ancient remains of cannabis. I think they're more finding modern remains that got mixed with ancient. And this happens much, much more frequently than we care to recognize. And that's because of, a combination, as I said, of people, sneaking in or using substances on the premises of the archaeological site that they shouldn't be doing, or just using sloppy practices when they do. So that's what I think is going on here. That's what I think when it happened for the case of that mummy in Egypt. And of course, the press loves this. The press absolutely loves the idea that, these things go way back. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. And I hope that answers the question. All right, let's start up Twidget here. Takes a couple seconds to load here. All righty. And okay, Devin Canada for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay, is Job really the oldest? Where is Uz? How did the culture there affect Jewish faith? Any thoughts on Elihu? Where did this book come from? All of Job. Wow, there's a lot of questions here, and probably more than I can answer here on the live stream. But I'll take some of these. Okay. Is Job really the oldest book of the Bible? I don't think so. Okay, I think that there are sections of the Torah that are much, much older. I think Job dates to the early Iron Age, so I think it's roughly contemporary with the time of, say, David, Solomon, and the early split monarchy. And it does seem to be post-Mitanni. And that's a very, very important dating factor here when it comes to the book of Job. It does very much seem to be take place when sort of Aram, because it mentions frequently the Chaldeans and the Arameans. It's at that point where it sort of splits. There's this sort of fracturing, this cultural fracturing that took place after the fall of the Mitanni Empire. Until then, northern Mesopotamia, especially during the late Bronze Age, had been dominated by the Mitanni. So I think that what we're seeing in Job is post-Mitanni Iron Age civilization. Okay. The next question, where's Uz? I'd have to look that up. I don't know off the top of my head, so I'd have to look that up and come to some sort of determination on that. I haven't actually looked at the geography of Job beyond any further beyond that. It's in say Aram, Syria, northern Mesopotamia, though that sort of broad region. How did the culture there affect Jewish faith? Now that one's very interesting, because it does seem to be, Job does very much seem to be It's a non-Jewish book inserted into the Jewish canon. The culture is very non-Jewish. Job is not following Torah. He's not living according to Torah law. He's essentially a Gentile. He's an Aramean, a Chaldean, you know, from that northern Mesopotamia, Aram area. So, how did that come into the Jewish canon? I think some of this is the fact that there were remnants of, say, the Mitanni people who were sojourners in Israel during the very end of the Late Bronze Age and into the beginning of the Early Iron Age. These sojourners were known as Hurrians or Hivites. So I think what happened here is that these Hivites had their tales of Job and his sufferings, and I think they bring that into the Jewish canon. And I think this is one of those places where we see sort of an overlap of cultures that's really significant. So that's where I think the book come from, and I think that's how that enters into, say, the Jewish canon. It's a cultural crossover. You know, the Jews of, say, the Judean foothills, you know, have this interaction with the Hivites, and that there's this sort of cultural exchange of texts, and we find these sort of cultural exchange of texts happening all across the ancient Near East. So this is nothing unusual, but we see here that you know, this is one example of where, say, of a theme that we actually find throughout the Jewish, the Israelite scriptures, which is the idea of the righteous Gentile. There's this sort of pattern that happens throughout the Jewish scriptures where, you know, Gentiles seem to sometimes stand out as more righteous than the Israelites. You know, Uriah the Hittite is an example. You know, the guy who holds the Ark of the Covenant. There's just these just righteous Gentiles that just stand out, you know. It's perplexing because we're told throughout scripture that you know, the Israelites are God's chosen people, but yet there are these Gentiles that are grafted in. And Job is an example here of a righteous Gentile. You know, Ruth is a righteous Gentile. You know, there are these righteous Gentiles that are just grafted in. And their stories are also grafted in. So I think that's what's happening here, is that Job is recognized as an example of a righteous Gentile. And because he is clearly an example of a righteous Gentile, his story from, say, the Hivites is grafted into Israelite literature. So anyway, I hope that answers your question, at least some of them. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay. Devin Canada, again, for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Did ancient Europeans really believe the northern kingdom of Israel was part of Phoenician? Oh, that's tough to say because I don't really know anything about ancient Europeans. It's really not my strong suit here. I can see where they would be confused here. Now, Phoenicia is essentially that civilization that basically extended from basically where the Jezreel Valley sort of meets the Mediterranean, basically Tyre, Sidon, modern Lebanon, essentially modern Lebanon. And the Phoenicians basically start colonies all over the Mediterranean. They go all the way to Spain and then back to, say, Carthage. So Phoenicia was really a very basically took Canaanite culture and spread it out all over, say, the Mediterranean basin. So I don't know what the ancient Europeans really believed, but I can also see too where some might have thought that the northern kingdom of Israel was part of Phoenicia, but it actually isn't. The two are actually separated. And they're generally separated by the big sort of landmark here is the Jezreel Valley. Although during the Solomonic kingdom, Solomon is able to press that border up into Syria. So I can sort of see where they could get that idea, but it depends on what time period you're talking about and how ancient Europeans you're talking about here. So thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay, 501 Mobius, Exodus 26, 16. The Hebrew. It's squint at this Hebrew. Well, let's look it up in a format I can read easier. Because this is really small on my screen. I can read the English just fine, but the Hebrew I can't read so well. So let's... You did include it. I appreciate that. I really appreciate that you also included the passage too. Okay. 26 and 16. Okay, and the Hebrew. All right, I see where's Esher Amut Arek HaKodesh Va'amach V'chatzi Ha'amach Ruchav HaKeresh Ha'ahad. Alrighty. $10 cubits, the length of each board, 1.5 cubits width of each board. Okay. What does it mean? It means that these are the dimensions of the boards used to make the tabernacle, essentially. 10 cubits long. Okay, the term arek is length. Okay, so eser is 10. This is just the same. Amah is a cubit, and a cubit is 18 inches. Cubit is 18 inches. So you are talking about 10 cubits. You're talking about 18 feet for each board, and 1.5 cubits wide for the board. So that's roughly what's being meant here. Is these are just plain old linear dimensions. So I don't think there's anything sort of magical or mystical going on here. I just think what's happening here is that it's giving you a precise dimension to how to make these boards. Now, one of the questions that's sort of posed by liberal scholars today is, how do you produce 10 cubit long boards, 18-foot boards of acacia in the Sinai? You know, you go to the Sinai today and you don't find any trees that are 18 feet tall. Okay. We do have to sort of remember that back in the late Bronze Age, that at the Sinai Peninsula was still savanna, that there were still large trees there. And we do have, say, like, for example, when they discovered the Red Sea boats. You know, these were boats that were built by Egyptians to do trade along the Red Sea. And every season that they would store these boats in caves, disassemble them, and then the following season come back, reassemble the boats, and then go back to sea. Some of the planks on those boards are actually 30 feet long. So we do know that in the Sinai, at some point, there were 30-foot long acacia trees, 30-foot tall acacia trees. Now, so we do find that those trees of that height are easily feasible given what we know about, say, the climate of the time and how tall acacia trees could grow. So I don't see anything magical here. It's totally feasible, and I don't think there's even a need to have a special interpretation here. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate it. Oh.
In the chat.
Yeah?
Is it 10 by 1.5 or 10 by 1 wide?
Oh,
and a half?
Okay. Well, let's take another look at that then. Okay, I get your question now. Okay, the question here is it 10 long and 1 wide and half? What was that? I'm going to see if I can find what you said here.
Is it 10 by 1 and a half? 10 by 1 wide?
Okay, I don't see that in here,
It's
but that's
the orange question underneath Jared Gilmore's chat. 501 timer and then 501 levels.
I don't see that either, so I'm going to actually have to restart my Twidget here because I'm not picking up, obviously not picking up some stuff. So this will just take a moment. We'll get there. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. We'll get there. We always seem to have some little. All right. We still seem to have a little bit of technical difficulties here and there, so we are trying. Okay, I see it. All right, I'm gonna put that up here. It's a 10 by 1.5 or 10 by 1 wide and a half. Okay.
And he's trying to calculate.
Yeah, heavy. That's the weight, is heavy. All right, and I'm gonna just pull up the Hebrew just again so I can see it. Okay, 10 length long. Okay, the boards are 10, according to the Hebrew, the boards are 10 cubits long. That's the first dimension. Then you got a conjunction. And a cubit and a half in width. Okay? So it's not 10 by 1 and a, it's 10 by 1.5, but not 10 by 1.5. Okay? So there does seem to be it boils down to kind of what conjunction here is being used. There is the conjunction here does seem to indicate that the half goes with the 1 and is not necessarily separate. Okay? Because it's 1.5 wide. Okay? So this is just the way they organize their numbers. Okay? So it's not 10 by 1.5, it's 10 by 1.5. Does that answer your question? Okay, I think that answers your question. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Okay. It is a good question, though. It is a good question because sometimes with these English translations, it can be hard to figure it out. Okay, a very, very generous super chat from Sinaiticus Apologia for $100. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Would you mind giving your thoughts on the Yahweh and his Asherah inscriptions? Absolutely. These come from the ostraca. They're not actually they are ostraca found at Tel Adrud. Now, these inscriptions are it comes from, say, it's a very fragmentary ostraca, and what you have is two figures, and then you have way off in sort of disconnected to that the inscription Yahweh and his Asherah. Now, several more liberal scholars have basically said that this is a portrayal of Yahweh and his wife Asherah. Well, there are some problems with that interpretation. The first problem with that interpretation is that, first of all, we don't know if Yahweh and his Asherah is actually connected to the figures that are shown, say, extremely offset to the inscription. So we don't even know that if the two figures on the ostraca apply to what is being shown. The second thing here that's very problematic is that is a grammatical problem. In the case of, say, a name, if Asherah is supposed to be the name of Yahweh's wife, you wouldn't find it written his Asherah. You would find it Yahweh and Asherah. The use of the possessive here seems to indicate that Asherah is not a name, but something else. My sense is that what's being shown here is the idea of Yahweh and, say, an Asherah pole. Because we do find Asherah being referred to as a pole all over the Levant. So now we do also see in some Levantine literature that Asherah can have, say, a female identity. Okay. But I also think that that's not necessary. And the reason why it has a female identity is because it ends with an H, essentially. So it does seem to have a feminine form. But it's also sort of, in my opinion, an Asherah is a votive pole. It's a fetish. Essentially, the same sort of kind of fetish that we find with the Osiris fetish, which is a big log. A big log that was seen as an idol and worshipped as being the bodily manifestation of Osiris. So that's what I think is happening with Asherah, is what we have here is a big fetish totem that ancient Israelites worshipped. And then what we're being shown here in the Tel Adrud inscriptions is a perception that Yahweh is being worshipped alongside a fetish. And I think the unfortunate thing is that we don't have the complete inscription here. So all this is going to be somewhat speculative. My interpretation of the inscription is speculative. The liberal interpretation of this is speculative because we just don't have enough to go on here. So, but I think we have enough here from, say, the inscription to at least sort of dismiss the idea that this is Yahweh and his wife. So, as I said, I know a lot of, say, more theologically liberal scholars have tried to make great traction of this, but I don't think it is quite what it seems. So, anyway, I hope that answered your question. Thank you very much for that. Very, very generous super chat. It really does help us out. I really very much appreciate it. You know, donations like this really help keep us going. So thank you very much appreciate it. Okay. Angel VW or WVM for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate it. Do you think the much older people in the Old Testament are literal ages? If not, can I get your thoughts, please? Okay. I don't I think they're ages, but I don't think they're ages of the people. I think they're the ages of the clan. One of the things we kind of have to understand about ancient Israelite identity is that it's clan-based. We today, one of the problems with reading the Bible with Western eyes is we tend to bring a lot of our own preconceived notions into the text. One of those preconceived notions that's sort of part of our context as Western North Americans is the idea of individual exceptionalism. That we as individuals are the most important thing in the whole universe. So when we come to a text like the Bible, we often bring that individualism into our reading of the Bible. Now, I mean, we do this all the time in American culture, almost invisibly. Oh, you can be anything you want to be. You know, if you just try hard enough, if you strive hard enough. Well, okay, look. I will never be an NBA basketball star. I'm short. There's no way. There's no way I'm going to be an NBA basketball star. I'm never going to be president of the United States because I'm a Canadian. No matter how hard I try, I'll never be president of the United States. There's just some things, you know, circumstances are going to prevent. Likewise, when we approach the biblical text, we have to recognize that we are not just dealing here with individuals. We're dealing with clans. Israel was a clan-based society. That was their context. That was sort of the society Israelite religion developed in. It's how their society, you know, grew, propagated, maintained its integrity. Everything is based upon, you know, the clan. The clan is central in every ancient Israelite text. So then it's almost is like the life of a clan is its own identity. So when we look at, say, the extended ages of the Old Testament, I think what we really need to do is we really need to look at that through the lens of, is it talking about clans? And I think, for example, say a lot of what we have in say the early parts of say Genesis, like Genesis 1 through 11, is clearly talking about clans. Now, when we talk about, say, the extended ages of later figures like Moses and Joseph, there's also something else going on here too, which is that these lifespans have really important significance in other ways. Like, for example, Joseph lives 110 years. Well, that just happens to be the canonical age of a wise man in ancient Egypt. Okay, it was said that if you were a really, really, you know, great wise man, full of power and wisdom and all that, you would live to 110 years. In the case of Moses, his 120 is 40 times 3. You know, his life is divided into 3 sections of 40 years. Now, earlier in this live stream, we already talked about 40 being a idiom, but it is an idiom that has significance. So it just so happens that 120 years is 10 more years than the wise man. So you're supposed to get the idea from the lifespan of Moses is that he's a greater figure than Joseph. Joseph saved his brothers by giving them sanctuary in Egypt. But Moses did more by freeing his people from the Egyptians. So there is a very, very there is a message that you are supposed to take away from these ages in the case of Moses and Joseph. And in the case of, say, Genesis 5 and 11, you're supposed to take away the idea that these clans had an extended long time where they lived and propagated and grew. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Slam RN for $10. Thank you very much for the super chat. Any evidence that the Valley of Hinnom was ever a garbage dump? I think that is the Kidron Valley. My pastor was talking about the word Gehenna transliterated into Greek, which Jesus used over. Yeah, there is actually it has been used as a garbage dump from time to time. So we do find that it was a place where garbage was burned. It was a place where garbage was burned. It was a place where criminals were tossed. You know, people who couldn't get proper burials because they were criminals. For example, the burial of the person who was crucified, who had the nail still stuck in his ankle, was found in the Kidron Valley. So yeah, there is evidence of that. It's frankly it's still used today in that capacity. But you know, like most landfills, you know, sometimes it was used for it, sometimes it wasn't. So it really depends. It was also the place where, say, effluent from the temple. And what I mean by effluent is when temple sacrifices were made, the blood from the sacrifices was sort of washed away with water, and that effluent flowed into the Kidron as well. So yeah, there's a lot here. It does have a very, very long history of this. And as I said, it was a place of burials for, say, the poor, the criminal. It was a place where garbage was burned. There was a Tophet there. We're told that there was a Tophet there. And a Tophet is a place of child sacrifice. So there was supposed to be a Tophet in Gehenna. So, or in the Kidron Valley, the Hinnom Valley. So there's actually a fair bit of at least evidence to support the idea that yeah, it was not a nice place. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated.
She's saying at the end, Kidron is not the valley of the sons of Hinnom. I mean, the garbage dump was the Kidron.
Oh, is that what you meant? Okay. Kidron was not the valley of the sons of Hinnom. I meant the garbage dump was the Kidron, not the Hinnom. Actually, they were both used for garbage dumps. Okay, they were both used for garbage dumps. So yeah, it's the same thing pretty much. We do find Tophet is in Hinnom. That is the Kidron, but the Kidron was also used as a garbage dump. The fact is, garbage was always a perennial problem in a city like Jerusalem. So yeah, it applies to both. So, but we find more in the Hinnom Valley. To be honest, if you've got the for example, the crucified man, he was found in the Hinnom Valley, but they were both used as garbage dumps, both of them. So okay, let's see here. What else? White girl with Instagram black screen for $10. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Can I squeeze 2 questions? Well, you can. I want to learn more about ancient Israelite religion. Any recommendation of books? Yes. Richard Hess's Ancient Israelite Religion is probably one of the best books on the subject. It's excellent. It's serious archaeology. So it's a great book. Love that book. Highly recommend that book. If you want to learn more, something a little more recent, you could use Behind the Scenes of the Old Testament by edited by, I think it's Walton. That is also an excellent book. So those would be the top two that I would recommend. Anything by John Walton, I think, talking about ancient Israelite religion is also very good. So those are sort of my top picks here. Also, what are your thoughts on the Kenite Midian hypothesis for Yahweh's origins? I think it has some legs. I think it's feasible. I think the idea that Yahweh comes from, say, Midianite religion, as far as it's sort of the vector of how it got into Israelite religion, is highly feasible, because we are told that Moses is bringing Yahweh back from his encounter in Sinai. So I do think this is very feasible. Yeah. Is it provable? Well, we don't actually have much inscriptions from that area to prove it. Our primary evidence of this comes from the Hebrew Scriptures, but I think it's sufficient here to take it seriously, especially when we look at, say, the religious practices that we find of the people at Avaris. Almost everyone agrees that the Israelites come from the city of Avaris. And I think that one of the things we sort of, having now excavated a good portion of Avaris, we can see that their religious traditions tend to be more along the lines of Baal, Resheph, Astarte, and Egyptian gods. So I think it's very, very clear that prior to Moses, they were not worshiping Yahweh or anything even close. So even from, say, the names we find at Avaris, they're non-Yahwist names. So it's very clear that they are worshiping a whole lot of other things than Yahweh, until the Exodus happens. After the Exodus is sort of seems to be the watershed where they start worshiping Yahweh in a serious way. So anyway, I hope that answers your two questions. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay. Theologia for $4.99. Thank you very much for the super chat. What's the evidence the kingdoms of David and Solomon are accurate as described in the Bible? Some scholars think they're great exaggerations. Well, that's sort of the million-dollar question. How expansive were the United Monarchy? Okay, we know during the time of Saul's still fighting the Philistines. Okay. David also has to fight the Philistines. During the time of Solomon, that war between the Philistines and the Israelites is over. The question is always going to be how expansive it was the Davidic and Solomonic kingdoms. And to some extent, we're still trying to piece this together. Now, we've got a lot more evidence than we had, say, 40 years ago. 40 years ago, it was thought that most scholars thought that David and Solomon, if they existed at all, were nothing but local tribal chieftains in amongst the tribe of Judah. Today, we know from, say, several discoveries like at Tel Asafi, and other little fortresses, that the role of, say, the Davidic kingdom was quite expansive. And we do see, for example, at Tel Asafi, that it was an administrative center. So given that it is an administrative center, that implies that there is actually an administration. We find things such as Hebrew inscriptions, not many, mind you, but some. So when we do talk about, how accurate, well, a lot of this is going to be a judgment call. We don't know we also have to sort of kind of, temper our expectations of how exactly is the Bible describing the kingdoms of David and Solomon. Now, we know, for example, like the first 7 years of David's reign was only out of Hebron and through the tribe of Judah. This is when he's having his civil war with Ishbosheth. So it's only after that civil war is resolved that, David assumes the entire 12 tribes as being a united kingdom. Solomon's reign is a little different because it does, from the very beginning, is part of that united monarchy, and just then expands its borders. So I do think there's enough here, and frankly, too, we have to also remember too that when the monarchy splits, when it divides into the divided monarchy, essentially the tribe of Judah and Benjamin versus the other 10 tribes, that too almost infers the existence of the united monarchy prior. The fact is, no scholar who's really serious today discounts the divided monarchy. Nobody discounts the existence of Jeroboam, Rehoboam, those figures. It's only like one generation prior that they start going, yeah, Solomon, we're skeptical about that guy Solomon. He sounded too good to be true. Okay. The fact you have a divided kingdom almost infers you have a united kingdom prior. So that also is textual evidence inferring that there was this united monarchy prior. But we don't even have to do that because there seems to be enough Solomonic remains, a Solomonic fortress at the city of David. There's enough here that I think that we can say that there was a united kingdom. The only question now is how great, how expansive, and how closely does that describe the Bible, what's described in the Bible. And we also have to remember, as we do all of this analysis, we always have to keep in mind is, are we interpreting the Bible right when we try to figure out what it says about that united monarchy? So I think there's something there that we have to really sort of keep in mind, that we don't over-exaggerate what the Bible says as well. And we do that sometimes, is because we don't often have a basis of comparison of the biblical literature. We sometimes, as Western readers, over-exaggerate sometimes the claims the Bible makes about itself. So, anyway, I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Angel VWM for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Do you ever watch Ancient Aliens for entertainment purposes? Oh.
I was waiting for you.
Oh. I will tell you what. There was a time, just out of curiosity, that I started watching Ancient Aliens. Oh, I couldn't get through it. I was just like screaming at the television at that point. No! 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 It was torture. It was absolute torture to watch. Especially that Giorgio Gorgias Tsoukalos, or whatever his name is. The guy with the Centauri hair. Oh, no, I can't watch that for entertainment purposes. It's just, oh, I die inside every time I see that. That might not prevent me from doing a popcorn video at some point on Ancient Aliens, but I don't watch it for entertainment purposes. It's just too painful. But thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate it. Okay, Jared Gilmore for $26. Thank you very much for that very generous super chat. How did the judges system work in pre-Kingdom Israel? Was it just a clan system where certain clan leaders were respected and could sometimes call other tribes to war, or did they have more formal recognized authority? The judges system in Israel seemed to be much more ad hoc than, say, formal authority. It was more along the lines that the judges had sort of this, for lack of a better word, prophetic anointing. That seems to be what's going on here with the judges. They do seem to have a prophetic anointing that they then exercise authority. I mean, the clan system does play into this, okay? But they seem to be, the judges seem to be over certain tribes. Now, in some cases, a judge could call on other tribes to participate in an action. Like we see that happen with Deborah, where she makes a call to the other tribes of Israel, and everyone shows up except Reuben. Okay. So we do see where one judge could call another, but we also see that at times judges could overlap. So you could have a judge in one tribe and a different judge in a different tribe happening almost, concurrently in parallel. So it wasn't just a judge over, say, all of Israel. It's more of a judge over a specific group of clans or a tribe. So that's what we see happening as far as how it worked in pre-Kingdom Israel. And the appointment of a judge didn't necessarily lead to a successor after that judge died. So just because a judge, rose up, and it almost seems to have been that the prophetic anointing was given after it was already recognized that this was somebody that God had called. So it's a recognition of authority more than the granting of authority. So that's what seems to be going on here, is that somebody rose up to meet the oppression of the people of Israel, or specific tribes of the people of Israel. So it's not just clan leaders, it's just specific individuals, and you do not have to be a clan leader to be a judge. Some were, some weren't, but you did have to have sort of this anointing by God to go forth and do it, whether that was recognized or not. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate that. Okay, Theologia for $4.99. Did ancients believe that the gods were eternal, uncreated, and transcendent like Yahweh, or did they combine them to space and time? Okay. Most cultures in the ancient Near East believed in what was called theogony. Theogony means the origin of the gods. So in most ancient Near Eastern cultures, gods were created. Sometimes self-created, but always created. Like, for example, the god Ptah was self-created. Other gods just emerged out of, say, the primordial waters. So they were all sort of created. They were not transcendent. they were eternal going forward, okay, from the point of their creation, but they weren't eternal going back in time. So they're one way eternal. So once they were created, they were eternal, but they weren't eternal until that point. They were definitely created, and they were not transcendent, and that's a really important point. Most of the ancients believed that the gods that created the world resided in the world of their creation. This is true across the board of all the Egyptian gods, all the Mesopotamian gods, and probably all the Levantine gods also, like we find in the Ugarit Ball cycle. So a god would come into existence, he would be created, he would then create the world, and then he would reside in the world he created. Or he would create a heaven and a world, and then he would go reside in his heaven. But that creation was still part of what was the act of that god. So gods in the ancient conception of gods were that they were eternal going forward, they were created, and they were immanent. And one other thing, they were also local. They also were in one place at one time. So it's not like Yahweh in that Yahweh can be in more than one place at one time. The gods, the ancient perception of gods were that they could be in only one place at one time. So this is why, for example, the Ark of the Covenant was sort of designed the way it was to accommodate that idea that, or at least that early belief, that Yahweh could be in only one place and one time. The Israelites, and frankly, this was a way of condescending to mankind. Yahweh, showed mercy upon the Israelites by not dumping everything on them at once. Yahweh used the constructs or the beliefs that the Israelites already had about ancient deities to then educate them, to get them to a place where they would then understand more broader concepts of divinity, such as transcendence, such as eternality, such as being uncreated. So basically, Yahweh used the conventions of ancient divinity and then flipped them on their heads, to teach the Israelites new concepts about himself. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay, Tom Wamcheck for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Any suggestions for ancient Egypt Old Testament themed Christmas gifts for high school age students, books, etc.? Probably mummifying a cat would probably just not be an appropriate gift. Although the Egyptians did that frequently. Yeah, don't mummify the family pet as a Christmas gift. You'll have more tears than happy openings. But there are some really, really interesting stuff you can do. There's a good selection of excellent books on ancient Egypt and the Old Testament, written at a variety of ages. Well, I'll tell you one that is actually really, really good, that especially for somebody in high school. I'll recommend, first of all, a book, which is the Moody Atlas of the Old Testament, by Barry Beitzel. It's not too technical, and frankly, a lot of high school students readily adapt to the idea of trying to connect the Bible to physical geography. You know, a lot of high school students are very, very curious about physical geography, and it's a really great time to start introducing ideas of physical geography to what high school students, to shore up their beliefs about, to show them that these are real places, people in real time, real history. They want to know that reality, that this stuff happened. So I think that book is an excellent book to give to a high school student. As far as other gifts go, well, there are of course the what's it called now, the replicas. They do make a variety. There is a variety, especially if the high school student is very, very interested in archaeology already. There are replicas of several artifacts that are made that are readily available now. I think even the Egyptian Museum right now has announced that they're making study quality replicas of various artifacts that are being stored in the Egyptian Museum. So you can go that direction too. Be a little careful about giving them like replicas of like cat goddesses and idols and that sort of thing. Just because you have to know basically where the high school student is at spiritually. But there's that. You can give them, study editions of the Bible. There are some very, very good. I think, what was it? The Christian, was it Study Bible? The CSB produced a very, very good study Bible too. And a study Bible like that, while not perfect, can provide a lot of very, very interesting resources. I wish I had that handy here. Otherwise, I'd show it to you. It's a big, thick study Bible. It's got lots of pictures. It's really very well done. Very well done. As I say, not perfect, but it is well done. So I take some exceptions on its Exodus section, but that goes without saying. But I still think it's actually a very good resource. So anyway, I hope that gives you some suggestions. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay, Devin Canada for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Thoughts on Chapter 3, Part 15 of Nennius History of the Bretons. Oh, I have nothing to say on this because talks about Celtic ancestors leaving Egypt. I'm a little familiar with this. There were some histories of, say, England that were produced around the 4th century AD. I don't know if this is one of them. There was the Book of Four Ways, I think, also mentioned this too. And that's essentially an Irish version of this. Obviously there's no basis there's no genetic basis, there's no genetic historical link between the Celtic ancestors and ancient Egyptians. So I've heard a little some suggestions of this, but I don't think there's any merit to it historically. So I can't say much more without reading it myself, specifically the history of the Bretons, but I've heard other claims in other, say, books from ancient, I mean, Anno Domini, early Anno Domini books from, say, the British Isles, so, and Ireland. So anyway, Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. But I can't say more about this. Okay. Frodo Jack for $10. Thank you very much, Frodo Jack. It's good to see you. Piggybacking on clans in Genesis, to me it looks like Adam, Eve, Seth, Enoch, Noah, and others are referred to as individuals. Yes, they are, but that's because clans are also referred to by the names of the individuals. Very common. Very, very common. Could the long ages related to Sumerian base 6 counting system? No, not really. Every attempt so far to refer to the ages according to base 60 or any other mathematical scheme has not been successful. And people have tried. People have tried. We do find, say, for example, in the Sumerian Kings list, where we have, say, more along that lines, where we do, say, have, say, very, very large but round number of years, like 28,000 or 12,500. So we do find that in, say, the Sumerian Kings list, but we don't find that in the first 11 books of Genesis. But it also is that a lot of clans got their start too. We also have to remember that because somebody did something great or something very naughty. So, yes, they are being referred to as individuals, but they're also being referred according to their clan as well. And sometimes it's also even maybe retrojective. Like, for example, Noah's clan is being retrojected back because the great person within Noah's clan is Noah. So the naming of clans can work both ways, where it is maybe the first person in the clan who does something a great deed that is really sort of stands out, or somebody later on who did something great that then is retrojected back to encompass the name of the entire clan. So individuals do stand out in clan structures. This is very common with clans. So it's not just a clan or individuals, it's both. It's both. So this is just sort of the ambiguity that we have to deal with when dealing with an ancient text, because we do find this happening in both ways. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay, Crucero Benny for 25. I think, what was Rowan again? Was that Romanian? Yeah, I think that was Romanian. Yeah. So thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay, Chronicles 7:20 to 24 and Genesis 48:2 say Manasseh and Ephraim traveled, built cities in Levant before Joseph died. Why then was not Joseph buried in Levant? All right, let's take a look at that Chronicles, because there was something hinky about that, as I recall. That is not quite what it seems. So I've encountered this before. First Chronicles 7. Okay. Starting at verse 20. And the sons of Ephraim were Shetulah and Bered his son, Tahath his son, Eliadah his son, Tahath his son, Zabad his son, Shetulah his son, Ezer and Eliad, among whom the men of Gath were born in the land, killed because they came down to take their livestock. And their father Ephraim mourned many days, and his relatives came to comfort him. And then he went to his wife, and she conceived and bore a son, and he named him Beriah, because misfortune had come upon his house, and his daughter Shariah, who built lower and upper Beharon and Uzzah Shariah. Okay. Now, as I best recall, go sons of Manasseh, yeah, okay. Now, the fact is that Ephraim did not go. He essentially did not go to the Levant. But what we have here is basically the generations that that come out of, say, Ephraim. Both Ephraim and Manasseh pretty much lived and died in Egypt, because that's where their tribe is established. It's established in Egypt. So they're not actually coming out to Levant. But what's happening here is it's talking about the posterity of Ephraim, and what happened here, where they entered the Holy Land, and this is all taking place after the conquest. Ephraim's not alive at this point. Ephraim would be over 300 years old at this point, so he's good and dead. He is good and dead at this point. But what Ephraim is a placeholder for the clan. He's a placeholder for the leadership of the clan. So when the men of Gath, who were born in the land, killed because they came down to take the livestock, and their father, Ephraim, mourned many days, and his relatives came to comfort him. This is talking about clan identity. This is talking clan identity. This is not actually talking about the physical person Ephraim. It's about clan identity and what the clan leader has to do to maintain clan identity. And what he does is he takes the place of Ephraim to maintain the cohesion of the clan, despite the fact that it had lost some very important members through this raid. So that's sort of what's going on in this chapter here. So we have to be careful not to we have to sort of keep our chronology and the identities of people straight as we sort of look at these texts, because ancient writers did have a tendency to slot people's identity in when they thought it was important for specific purposes. Now, Genesis 48, I'm just going to read that too. All right. And then Israel said to Joseph, behold, I'm starting at verse 21. Israel said to Joseph, behold, I'm about to die, but God will be with you and bring you back to the land of your fathers. And I will give you one more portion than your brothers, which I took from the hands of the Amorite with my sword and my bow. Now, that's part of the prophetic blessing that Jacob gives to his sons and the sons of Joseph. I think that is that Joseph speaking, or is that okay? Yeah, this is Jacob speaking to Joseph. So this is prophetic. This is something that's yet to be fulfilled. And so he's not saying that Ephraim is going to immediately sort of pick up stake, take his entire family back to Israel, where they sort of congregate the land. We know that when during the Exodus that there are Ephraimites and of the tribe of Manasseh. So that's part of the Exodus. So Ephraim is not going back to and Manasseh are not going immediately from the death of Joseph back to the Holy Land. You know, they're actually going to be in Egypt with the rest of the Israelites until they come into their inheritance at the conquest. So that's what's happening here. Now, Joseph is buried in Egypt. When he dies, he's buried in Egypt. And one of the reasons why he's buried in Egypt and then his body is then disinterred and brought back with the Israelites to Canaan is because there's no military escort, essentially. Joseph could bury Jacob immediately upon mummification in Canaan because Joseph had, as vizier, had the power to procure a military escort to get them safely from Egypt to Canaan and back again. Now, in the case of, say, Joseph, he dies in Egypt. He's mummified. He's buried in Egypt, and frankly, his descendants no longer have the same power that Joseph had. So there's no facility there. There's no ability there to get a military escort to do the burial in Canaan. But his body is basically, his mummified body is recovered during the Exodus, and then it is returned to Canaan at that time. So that's the reason why, even though 1 Chronicles 7:20-24 suggests that Ephraim, it traveled to Canaan, but didn't take the body of Joseph with him, that's the reason, just because he didn't actually go there. It was his clan that ended up going there. And that during the death of those important members, you had a proxy in the clan leader who's being identified as though he was Ephraim to maintain clan cohesion. So anyway, it's a difficult subject because it is a complicated text. So I hope that answered the question. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay. Lance for $6.99 Canadian. Thank you very much. Great to have you here, a fellow Canuck. Okay. Were the Old Testament dietary laws to set them apart from neighboring nations? If yes, how? The whole kosher system was designed to set them apart. It was designed to make them think. It wasn't just, the kosher system was not just about dietary laws. It seeped into every aspect of Israelite life. It defined what clothes you wear. Are you wearing wool? Are you wearing flax? Are you mixing your fibers? It referred to agricultural practices. It had an impact on say important festival days, how you cleaned your house, how you what was clean, what was unclean, what was holy, what was abomination. It infiltrated every aspect of life in ancient Israel. And the purpose of the laws, the ceremonial laws, was to get the Israelites into this mode of black and white thinking. Really, antithetical thinking is what it's called. Either it's clean or it's unclean. Either it's holy or it's unholy. Every deed, every act, every meal, when you get up in the morning and you dress, everything that the Israelites do were meant to get them into a mode of thinking where they are weighing every action as to how what they do conforms to what God prescribed, so that God could have at least established relationship with them. One of the things we have to understand about the ceremonial law, and I think this is really, really important when we talk about, say, dietary laws and ceremony, because dietary laws are part of the ceremonial law. one of the things we have to talk about when it's the ceremonial law is what is the purpose of the ceremonial law? Think of it this way. Think of it, I mean, I'm kind of dating myself here. Think of it like whiteout. Now, yeah, I'm really dating myself here, but back in the day and age when there was typewriters, oh my gosh, typewriters. Let's say you were given 100,000 pages of handwritten notes, and you're sitting at a typewriter, and you are supposed to do 100,000 pages, type it perfectly without making a single mistake. Well, anyone who's done any amount of typing knows you are not going to get very far before you hit the wrong key. What? So let's say you're typing and you hit that wrong key. Now, as a typist, the first thing you do is you reach in the drawer, you pull out the whiteout, you cover the mistake with the whiteout, and then you type the right key over top of it. The ceremonial law in ancient Egypt is like that. The sacrificial system, the kosher law, is like that. It's whiteout, covering over sin, so that God can have relationship with man until Messiah comes. And not just puts whiteout over the mistake, but eliminates it entirely. That's the importance of the ceremonial law, including the kosher dietary laws. The dietary laws are there so that God can have rapport with man. Because essentially, if you want to worship God, you've got to do it God's way. Now, the flip side of this, of course, is that I think some of the dietary laws have been overinterpreted. Like, for example, the whole mixing of meat and dairy. I think that's an overinterpretation. That was done during, say, the Second Temple period. It's clear from the text that it's not actually prohibiting a cheeseburger. What it's actually prohibiting is you milking your cow and then essentially boiling the calf from that cow in that milk. It's a hedge against barbarism, essentially. That's what it is. So I think some of these kosher laws have been overinterpreted, but many of them are essentially what they say they are. Like, for example, there's a prohibition on eating shrimp because it is disgusting. And it's not abomination. The text does not say abomination. It's disgusting. You know, that's a very, very different thing than, say, what the Israelites would categorize, say, abomination. Eating shrimp's not abomination. It's disgusting. There's a difference there. There's actually a really serious difference between the two. So we also have to take all these dietary laws in light of their context as well. So there's a lot going on here, a lot of moving parts to the kosher law, and a lot of moving parts to the ceremonial system. But I hope that gives you a little more understanding about the kosher laws and how they work. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Eduardo for $4.99. Thank you very much for the super chat. Hello, what are your thoughts on Graham Hancock? I've heard him speak on Rogan's podcast. Oh my gosh. I think Graham Hancock is a joke. I do not. I have no respect for Hancock's work. It might as well be Ancient Aliens. I mean, it's just pitifully bad scholarship. Just pitifully bad. I don't know why anyone takes this guy seriously, honestly. He's written so much junk archaeology, it is not even funny. and not that Rogan is a good judge of the value of his guests. I mean, a lot of times Rogan gets people on his podcast because they are, you know, they're inflammatory. You know, they're controversial. You know, and that's what Rogan does, is he sort of baits his podcast to get ratings, to get views. And Hancock will get views. You know, he's a clown as far as the archaeology goes, but he will get views. So anyway, you've heard my thoughts about Graham Hancock. I have no respect for him. I think his book on the Ark of the Covenant was horrific. It was terrifyingly bad. Terrifyingly bad. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate it. RG Strategy for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Well, maybe later. Maybe later. So thank you very much for the super chat. It's good to see you here tonight. Your opinion on the possible old Sun Temple find that was announced not too long ago. I thought I should say something. Okay. If that would be really exciting if we found another Sun Temple. I'm not aware of this finding myself. There are 7 Sun Temples recorded in the Egyptian literature. We have found 2 of them. So there's 5 more out there at least. So if this adds one or more to that would be really exciting. But I would like to see several more Sun Temples found, so we get a better idea of what they looked like. You know, a few more texts would be fantastic from these Sun Temples as well. So these are phenomena that are distinct to the 5th dynasty. We don't find them being built after Dynasty 5. They seem to be private royal worship. They're fascinating. They're absolutely fascinating. But there's more we really can learn about these, because the 2 we have found are not terribly well preserved. So that's all I know right now about this. If I find out more, I'll let you know. Anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay, 501 Mobius for $10. Thank you very much for the super chat. Per Leviticus, at Mount Sinai, priests were supposed to cook fine wheat flour, barley meal, olive oil, frankincense, and they used wine and strong drink. Where did they get all these things? Okay. Well, at Mount Sinai, they were still, you know, they still had a lot of supplies from Avaris. Okay. When the Israelites left Avaris, they didn't leave empty-handed. You know, people think they left empty-handed. No, they packed as much stuff onto their carts as they could. You know, the plunder of Egypt didn't only include gold, silver, bronze, skins, precious stones. It didn't only include that stuff. It also included the food stores. You know, they're not going to leave Egypt empty-handed. They're going to take as much stuff they had. Now, they had lots of meat already. You know, one of the things about the plagues is, you know, when it killed all the cattle and sheep in the field, you know, they didn't let that stuff rot in the field. You know, they harvested and salted it. We have to remember that the Israelites and the Egyptians salted meat for preservation. Okay? So as far as, say, the wheat flour, that was a very, very common staple crop around Avaris. It's still grown there today. This is emmer wheat. Egyptians ate tons and tons and tons of this stuff, so there was a lot of it there. Barley meal, same deal. Most of the barley in Egypt was used for, say, making beer for water purification. But it could also be used to be eaten. It can also be eaten. So that is where, I mean, that was a common staple crop in Egypt. Olive oil, The Egyptians did have olive trees. We don't know the extent of the olive oil presses in Egypt. Some people have speculated that olive oil was imported into Egypt. But Avaris being the major port city in that region, you know, a lot of ships came into Avaris and would trade. So we do find Tel Yehudia ware there. So we do know that there were Levantine imports into Avaris. So it is very, very conceivable that olive oil was imported in there to Avaris. As far as the frankincense, now the frankincense is a little different because it's part of the frankincense trade. Now, there's several ways they could have gotten the frankincense. Now, the Egyptians did have a revolving trade of incense, frankincense, myrrh, with punt. So they did regularly trade in these items with punt. There was also a incense caravan trade that basically crossed the Red Sea and traveled across the Sinai. So it is possible that the Israelites could have traded for frankincense while they were in the Sinai. That is entirely possible. So we don't know the exact origin of the frankincense, but we do know that it was available in the Ramesside period. So that's totally feasible. And that trade in say frankincense with punt didn't end until the end of Dynasty 20. Really, so really that's sort of when it came to an end. Some you could even speculate it might have even started tapering off even earlier as Ramses III, but that's still long after the Exodus. As far as the wine and strong drink, now, while at Avaris, there were vineyards being grown, and Semitic peoples were being used to tend those vineyards, because it was thought that the making of wine was a specialty that you had Semitic slaves do. So conceivably many of the sons of Jacob would have been involved in the making of wine as well. So the Egyptians did have vineyards in Egypt. They didn't import all their wine, they made wine. And Levantine Asiatics were the ones who tended to the vineyards and who ultimately made the wine. So they would have had access to that as well. As far as the strong drink, there is some a controversy over what does strong drink actually mean. It's possible that what we're talking about is a highly fortified wine or double fermented wine. So basically a wine that's not only just gone through a primary fermentation phase, but also what's sometimes called a malolactic fermentation phase as well, to increase the amount of fermentation from say 6% ABV, absolute volume of alcohol, to as potentially as high as 18% absolute volume, ABV, alcohol by volume. So it is conceivable that they could have pumped it up that high just by manipulating the fermentation process. So that's where I think they got all these some. Now, it's interesting when the Egyptians get drunk, they're not getting drunk on beer. Beer is sort of the as I say, the common everyday drink for water purification purposes. When the Egyptians get drunk, they're getting smashed on wine. Wine is the drink of choice to get drunk in Egypt, because they were able to manipulate it to be quite strong. So anyway, I hope that answers your question as to where they got that from. And again, we're talking just say the Sinai priests. You know, this is not that long into the Exodus. It's only like the first year and a bit. So they could have still had these items easily by this point in time. You know, they're not yet starving. They haven't run out of the supplies they brought with them from Egypt. So I think that's where they got them from, at least initially. They might have had to replenish later, but that's where I think they got them initially. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Angel WVM for $5. Thank you very much. Oh, please do a popcorn video of ancient aliens. Oh, now you're going to get me in trouble with the ancient aliens crowd. Yeah, doing the one on Holy Kool-Aid and Digital Hammurabi was bad enough. There's still people angry at me over those. I'll think about it. I'll think about it. But thank you very much for the super chat. Okay. Voltaeus Catellis for $4.99. Thank you very much for the super chat. Where does Kathleen Kenyon talk about the late bronze destruction layer for Jericho as you talked in your vid on Lorenzo Nigro's discovery? Okay. I would recommend that you also look at the errata as well. Because what she does is she actually quotes Garstang, and it's actually Garstang in his 1949 book that he talks about the late destruction layer. Garstang identifies two destruction layers. One is associated with Kathleen Kenyon's City 4. The other one is, say, what's called the Middle Building. Okay, and that one's the late bronze destruction layer. And Kathleen Kenyon actually quotes that. So that's what she's talking about as far as the late bronze destruction layer when she does briefly destruct at the beginning, I think, of volume 3. I think it's page 2 where she just quotes it. But it actually was discovered by Garstang. Okay. So and it's quoted in his revised book. So already after his findings have been revised by Kathleen Kenyon, and Garstang accepts Kathleen Kenyon's findings here. Now, one of the things we need to say about Kathleen Kenyon's findings about, say, City 4, and I think one of the things we have to be very cautious about when taking, for example, Kathleen Kenyon's findings is that City 4 is not a good match for Biblical Jericho. It's a terrible match for Biblical Jericho. One of the problems with it is that these are middle bronze fortifications. City 4 is a middle bronze city. And has middle bronze fortifications. And one of the things with middle bronze fortifications is that you've got a single massive wall of large stone blocks. And it's very clear that what we see in, for example, in the Joshua account is Rahab the harlot. She is living between the walls, inside the walls. So the walls are casemate. And we don't find those casemate walls until the late bronze fortifications. So Lorenzo Nigro did discover mud brick walls that are casemate design. They're mud brick, but they're casemate. And he ruled out that they were destroyed during what's called late bronze 2A. So this would be during, say, the time of Amenhotep III, where we do actually find some evidence of, say, Amenhotep III. At least there's some trade goods from Amenhotep III found in tombs at Jericho. So if we've got a late bronze 2A cemetery at Jericho, and we've got late bronze walls that are extant through late bronze 2A, and then no other building phase again until, say, Iron Age 1 or Iron Age 2. I can't remember which Iron Age it is that we start seeing building again. It almost demands that we have a destruction of those walls happen during Late Bronze 2B. And I think that's the only reasonable sort of fit for Garstang's Late Bronze destruction there. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay, and that is the end of the super chats. Wow. That was a lot of super chats. Okay. I'm just going to take one or two more non-super chat questions, and then I'm going to call it a night because it's almost 10 p.m. We're at 9:52. So I'm going to take a couple more questions. And let's see here. I'm going to think for truths here. Okay. He asks the question, did Egyptians communicate with I'm presuming you mean dead people? And I heard Jewish people in the Old Testament also asked intercession to the death, Sotah 34b, and prayed for the dead. Is this true? There were practices in ancient Judaism where people did pray for the dead. Okay, that seems to be in the Talmud. And the ancient Egyptians certainly tried to communicate with the dead. They would use, say, funerary furniture, coffins, canopic chests as a means to try to communicate with the deceased. So the Egyptians did try to communicate with dead people. So this was very, very common. In fact, there was a festival that would happen once a year called Festival of the Valley, where the Egyptians in Thebes would go to their ancestral tombs, bring their picnic lunch. They brought their picnic lunch because you can't have a good communication with the dead without a picnic lunch. And they would basically have this little picnic in front of their ancestral tombs. And during the time when they're eating, they're having their little their particular, bread and chickpeas and whatever they're eating at that time, they're talking to the dead people. They're talking to their ancestors. So very, very common in ancient Egypt. Very common. Happened regularly. So it was very, very common for Egyptians to try to communicate with the dead. And as I said, we also see some of this in, say Jewish intercessory prayer as well in Israel. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much for the question. Very much appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to take BK Apologist question. Hey, Alfredo, how's it going? Good to see you. All right. How do you respond to someone who claims that Moses used Heka against the priests in Egypt? Okay, Heka is the Egyptian word for magic. Okay. Wow. Well, the fact is that, Moses is told at the burning bush that God would perform these miracles, basically at his beck and command. So I don't think you can make the claim that Moses used, say, magic here. These are everything that Moses does is imbued with the power of God. This isn't magic. Magic is man's attempt to try to change the course of reality, basically manipulate nature against God, sympathetic with God, but without the sanction of God. Okay? Everything that Moses does God says he's going to perform. God says, you cast your rod down, it will turn into a snake. And that's because God has ordained that this is going to happen. He is going to make it happen. So, you know, the claim that Moses used magic here is just sterile conjecture. It's just empty conjecture. We have a text basically that explains what happened. So if you're going to make the claim that he used magic, well, you better have something. And frankly, the sort of the there are some sort of pseudepigraphal texts that float around that talk about Moses using magic, especially Gnostic texts. There are Gnostic texts that do claim this. But again, what's the pedigree here? Gnostic texts were written thousands of years after the events. In the case of the Torah, we have something that's much, much more contemporary with what Moses actually did. So again, it's a matter of the proximity of the witnesses here too. With the Torah, we can pretty much tell that the Torah, at least the major sources of the Torah, were written in the late Bronze Age. So within at least, say, you know, no more than 100 years of Moses' lifetime. Whereas with the Gnostics texts, we're talking 1,300 years, 1,200 years after the fact. Well, how much can you take that seriously? So that's how I would respond to that claim. I hope that helps. I hope we can collab again sometime soon. I love being on your channel, and I would give a shout out to anyone listening to this live stream. Do check out BK Apologist channel. It's fantastic. It's a great channel. Love that whole bodega community. It's a fantastic, supportive community. Great people there. Absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much for the question, Alfredo, and I'll see you soon. Okay, and I will take one more. Okay, and let's see here. I'm gonna see what else. I will take this last. This will be the last one of the night, and it will be from Marcy Powell. So this is going to be our last question for the night. Okay, if the Yam Suf is a lake on the border of the Sinai Peninsula, which border? How did Solomon have a port there as Yon Gever? Is there more than one Yam Suf? Yes, that's exactly what happens. There's more than one Yam Suf. Yam Suf is just a term that means Sea of Reeds. Okay, and there's two Yam Suf. There's the one at the northern sort of marshes of the Gulf of Aqaba. Okay. And then there's one at the what's called the Bitter Lakes. Today we would call this the Suez Canal. In ancient times, there was a branch of the Nile that was called the Nile in ancient times had three branches, not two. One of those branches was the Pelusiac, and it cut eastward towards into the Sinai. It reached as far as into the Sinai and dumped into the Mediterranean. And there were a lot of these marshy. It was a massive estuary there, absolutely massive estuary that had reeds. And the Egyptians called this the Yam Tuf, or the Yam Tufi, sometimes the Tufi. And Tufi is the Egyptian word for reed. Suf is actually an Egyptian loanword. It's a word that's loaned from Egypt into the Hebrew language. Okay? So when we look at, say, a Yam Suf, we have to see that it's not just enough to say, okay, the Yam Suf means one thing. It has multiple meanings depending on its historical context. During the time of the Torah, that given the place names that surround the Yam Suf, which are the fortress Migdol, of which we have a map from ancient Egypt, Pihahirot's nearby, Pithom's nearby, Ramses is nearby, Charu is nearby. We have all these geographical proximities for the earliest Yam Suf that place it in the northwest Sinai region. Okay, so that's really not even debated anymore in serious scholarship, because we got so much Egyptological textual evidence for this. Now, you get into Solomon's time, you know, already at this point, over 200 years have elapsed. Now what we have is a context that's no longer connected to Egypt in the same way. So what they do is they reappropriate that name, Yam Suf, Sea of Reeds, for the port near Ezion Geber. So yes, there is more than one Yam Suf, but it also happens to be different based upon the geographical context of the passage. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much for that question, and we are going to call it a night. Anyway, I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Great set of questions, wonderful set of questions, fascinating as always. I want to thank our subscribers. If you haven't noticed, we're getting really, really close to 4,000 subscribers, and I'm really excited about that. I think we're just like 30 away now from hitting the big 4,000. So I want to thank all our subscribers who watch our videos and, you know, provide such great feedback and provide an excellent community. And I want to thank the people in our live chat tonight. What we're trying to do here, we're trying to build a community. We're trying to build a community that loves the Bible, loves the evidence, loves the scholarship, and is willing to share that with others. So we are building a community here. So I want to thank everyone who participated tonight. Thank you for everyone who donated a super chat. That goes directly to supporting the channel and to help us bring more content to you. I want to thank our Patreon supporters. They also are an invaluable support to us. They really do help us make ends meet. And I want to wish everyone a good night, and I will see you next time on Ancient Egypt and the Bible.